Welcome, everybody. Welcome to YouTube Model Builders Tuesday night presentation. We have the great pleasure of having Bob Werre, photographer of Great Plains Northern Terminals. I am Dude Lindler from Crooked Fingers Railroad, and tonight's presentation will be on how to photograph train layouts. It'll be on stills, stack stills, and etc. Anything to do with photos. You might even get a couple good ideas on how to photograph anything to do with railroading. Just a reminder to all of you viewers to keep checking out the YouTubeModelBuilders.com for all the latest info on the live show schedule each month. Show and the weekly presentation, also bi-monthly. We got something new going on in the presentation now. The first Tuesday of every month we've got the Gino show. The second Tuesday of every month we've got Troy coming in to doing a moderated hangout, and the third Tuesday will be me, and then the fourth Tuesday will be Barry and Mike, and that's going to be kind of like a tech show, anything to do with DCC, anything. And all these presentations will have guests, as just like in the past, with presenters. And don't forget about the EMAG. The May issue is out. You can go to the YouTubeModelBuilders.com, sign up to get whenever the EMAG comes out, you'll get emailed a link so you can go directly to the EMAG and view it. There's some really good stuff in there. JD and his team do an exceptional job. Actually, the EMAG team has grown a little bit, so there's a lot more of guys involved in that. So, anything to do with YouTube Model Builders, just go to the website and everything is there. There's a lot of cool stuff. We just had the anniversary show for the YouTube Model Builders, and that was pretty cool. They invited me in there, and but anyways, the further ado, we got Bob Werre here, and we're going to go ahead and see what he's got to say about photographing your layout. Bob, it's all you, man.
Okay. Good evening, guys. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Good evening.
Okay. I'm going to rely upon some of you to have some questions for me. The problem with railroading is everybody in photography is everybody's both. And what level you're at in modeling and what level you are in photography is something that I don't know and not aware of. And some of you may be great modelers and terrible photographers. Others may be great photographers and terrible modelers, or anything in between. So I'm come in at a level that I hope you can understand, and maybe you can, maybe you're way above me. I'd say even a possible, very distinct possibility. But doing photography is something that I started doing when I started doing railroads, pretty much. I got my first train set at about 7 years old, and it wasn't long before I had a little tabletop and started taking photographs of the progress the very, very slow progress I had in grade school. But I do railroad, I chase trains, and I'm, photograph the model trains. I want to talk just a little bit about the actual prototype stuff that I find once in a while. I love to do that. With security being the way it is in some areas, we end up doing a lot less of that. Because it's dangerous. And there apparently, what I'm told is, and I have a couple of friends who claim they're on this list, is that if you get caught on railroad property more than a couple of times, they do take your name and address and run some kind of a possibility of being incarcerated for that particular offense. At any rate. We all love the chase. We've all chased trains, I think, around the woods, and you get ahead with a line, and you set up your cameras and get out there, and all of a sudden you got 50 people around you. it becomes a little difficult to do too. But I love the chase. I do that, and I do rail fanning from inside the train whenever possible. Uh, but my main reason for doing photography of the real thing was to document what was there. If you go and you're modeling Illinois Central someplace and you live in New Jersey, you probably need to go out to the Illinois Central area where they ran some stuff and document the flavor of that railroad in that area. So that's kind of important. Another thing is to document the scenery. You know, if you want to plywood central, that's fine. But if you start wanting to put some bumps and dips in the railroad, you need to find out where the bumps and dips, what they should look like. So again, that's the photography part of it. And with the cheap digital cameras nowadays, you can go out and do that pretty simple. Even your iPhones typically will do that. I love to create some artwork once in a while. Occasionally win a prize or two, or a ribbon from some kind of contest. And people appreciate it. They love trains. Even people that are not in the railroading love trains. It's this thing, I guess. It's puppy dogs, pretty girls, and trains. All will lighten their lives a little bit. Another thing you have to consider here is that you can actually go out and do your sky shots and have large prints made up. Even that some of your local labs will print up a panoramic type photograph, which you can put together, and that'll be a nice background for you. So that's a possibility. I have a couple of buildings on my layout, flat fronts that were just photographed in the Chama area when I was doing narrow gauge railroading. Just backed up to the front of a building someplace and photographed it, and made a print of it. I modeled an S scale, so I took an S scale window down there and told my color printer at the time, ribbon from some kind of contest, and people appreciate it. They love trains. Even people that are not in the railroad love trains. It's this thing, I guess. It's puppy dogs, pretty girls, and trains. All. Okay. Am I lost here or something?
It sounded like repeated or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like somebody was playing the video in the background.
Okay. I don't like to hear myself. I sound weird. At any rate, I was saying I just took a S-scale window down there and gave it to my printer. I said, enlarge this photograph to where this window is the same size as a window on your print, and they did. So I just have a proper size window without having to do any measurements and that sort of thing. Just did it that way. Anyway, now getting the model trains part of the thing. One of the best things to do is when you do attend your conventions or NMRA type tours someplace, is photograph the darn things. Get your cheap little camera, be unobtrusive as possible. Ask permission from the layout owner. Hey, do you mind if I get a couple of snapshots? And generally they'll say, yeah, go ahead, do it. And you can pick up a building that you think that they modified nicely. If he's got some great scenery, document it. Take it back home, study it, and see what you can use on your layout. If you can. That's the reason for the societal part of all this sort of thing. And the same thing with your layout. If you build something out and you say, maybe it's not quite right, stick your camera down near the ground someplace and take a couple of quick photographs and say, what can I do to improve this sort of thing? Now you have run some cheap prints off on your little Epson printer or something and look at, study it, and say, hey, maybe I could use not put a window in here just like you remodel your house, or maybe we need some downspouts, or maybe some weathering streaks inside the building. Anything like that can improve your modeling. You'll also notice that if you ever photograph your locomotives and your cars, you won't believe the amount of dust that camera will pick up. That if you're meticulous about your stuff, you do a lot of scrubbing. Keep the place clean, Another thing is,
it sounds like when you take photographs too, Bob, that especially like a professional level like what you do, you pick up the really strong detail in buildings, track work, rolling stock, locomotives, and all that. Because when you brought up the dust thing, that, that told me that when you take a really good photograph, you'll pick up the really, really good details of, when you build a structure or something like that, right?
Exactly. And the problem have sometimes, some of my buildings are getting on 20 years old, and so some of them may have a little bit of wear to them, and you get a little bit of upturned, the roof is upturned a little bit, or some shingles have been knocked loose. I mean, the real things happen too, but you look at these things and say, gosh, I really need to work on that, and so you put that on your project to-do list, one of 155 things you have to do before your next open house to cover. But it's always nice to show people what you're doing on Facebook or any of the other lists. The Model Railroad Hobbyist has got a chat list. O Scale Railroading has a chat list, and people are constantly going back and forth on that and showing what they're doing, and it helps your ego a little bit because we all work in our little caves, and so sometimes seldom get out of it. So it's nice to show something and say, hey, guys, hey, I really like that thing. Tell me about it. Show me what you've done besides the one photograph you got there. Then you have a conversation, and we may pick up something and learn it. Another thing is when you come across something that's pretty neat and it's a little bit involved, document it and write an article. NMRA magazine or whatever it's called nowadays will pay you a couple $100. Kalmbach will pay you a few $100s for an article. And obviously on this list here, I imagine there's a place to put that sort of information. Doesn't have to be elaborate, doesn't have to be stupendous, but the bigger magazines will rewrite what you've gotten if they need to. But document it with some photographs, nice, clear, sharp ones, and I'll tell you a little bit about how that can be done pretty easily in a couple of minutes. Another thing is when you're if you intend to enter a model in a contest, the judge often will not know what you put into it. You can describe it a little bit, but it's better if you show some photographs. Here we have a 1955 Mantua mogul or something, and you carve all the parts off, show that, and you add some brass castings to it, show that. If you're going to gut the motor out of there and put a decoder in there and all that sort of thing, show that. That way they can go through that, your requirements for your for your award or whatever, and get you some good modeling points on that part. So that's really about it. What I want to do is show you just some basic photographs. Some of these may be my favorites, and some will be some actual clients I worked with. I worked with several clients over the years, all the way from Intermountain to Red Caboose to a company called S Helper Service, which is one of my favorite clients, and unfortunately they're gone now. Another one was called American Models. Again, they modeled S-scale. Smaller manufacturers, one of them called East West Models. He's come out with one laser kit. It will hopefully come out with some other ones eventually. But I enjoy working with these type of things. Sometimes they send me the models and I build them, which is obviously rather time consuming sometimes. Other times I get the a brass import in and I photograph it and ship it back, and we have a nice product at the end. So these things will appear in various magazines over the years. S-Helper was probably the most prominent as far as advertising goes. They typically ran in classic toy trains because they were sort of on the high, what we call the high rail side of it. But they came out with a 40 to 60 page catalog over the years, and that was a wonderful thing to work on, as well as made me some money to buy more trains. So here's the stuff I'm going to show you now. This is obviously a prototype shot, and it shows my last 30-some years. I've lived in Texas, and every year we have Texas bluebonnets, which that season has passed about a month ago or so now, I guess. And this is some some scenes I captured a few years back. This was shot with a film camera, believe it or not, a 6x12 wide format type camera. Love that camera. Expensive. Of course, now film cameras have become worthless, so I sold it at a good time when it was still a little bit of money in it. This was done as a presentation for people at Digitrax. I was trying to talk them into doing an ad campaign. It was not successful. You didn't see it in the ads, but this is a Norfolk and Western A that I used to own, and in this case, I built a small set in my studio and shot it with what we call painting with light, which is just basically a very expensive flashlight that you just light up certain areas at a time. And so the exposure here is probably 20 to 30 seconds. And you paint the light back and forth like you would with a brush, with an airbrush, for instance, and you paint what you see. Now, every frame is going to be different, and that's real hard for some people to understand, that you want to change some things around a little bit, and sometimes you improve one area and you hurt some other areas, but eventually you'll get it, pretty close to being right. And here's the same engine.
Bob, we do have one question here while you're starting out here.
Okay.
Bill from D&H South Central Division, he's wanted to ask, what type of cameras do you normally use when taking these types of photos?
Well, that depends. For instance, the photograph you're looking at now, which is at Norfolk Western A, old Winston Link type tribute, was probably shot on a 4x5 view camera. This is a few years old. I think it was shot with a 4x5. I don't even know. The one prior to that was just a Nikon D2H. The camera's really, in most cases, kind of immaterial. Anything right now above, I'll even go back a while. Anything above 6 megapixels is going to produce something of professional quality if the rest of the camera matches it. So the megapixel is simply the size of the motor, for instance, on a car. You got to have if you're going to race cars, you have a 6 megapixel motor. You need, the tires, the chassis, the driver, all that sort of thing to go with it. And so when you talk about megapixels, it really doesn't mean a lot. But as far as the image quality that it can produce, that's all you need.
Are these telephoto lenses? That was his next question. Is what type of lenses do you? Are these like telephoto auto lenses or?
Well, obviously the 4x5 view camera, you had a series of lenses you bought, and they were hundreds of dollars a piece, and you picked a lens that really worked for you. In this case, I would bet it's probably a wide angle, which is probably equivalent to like a 28 on a typical 35 camera. It's a fairly wide lens because this thing is, I'm probably back a foot from the edge of the layout, but I want to get down pretty low to the ground, which is hard to do with a view camera because it's a large camera. So you have some things working against you, but and I want to make it look like it was a block or two away. Is going through town and past the depot, and the flash bulbs go off, and Winston Link is sitting back there smiling at all the money he's going to make selling these prints to to suspecting tourists later on or something. But I use zoom lenses a lot nowadays, and so what length of a zoom did I use? I don't remember. I shoot and shoot and shoot until I like it, and I'll make a get in a little closer, get a little farther apart. I'll either do that physically or with the zoom lens. This is the problem that I have. I've been doing it so long. It's sort of like a carpenter grabbing a particular hammer for something. He's not going to know specify what he used. It was a shingle, put in shingles, or a finish hammer, or regular, or even a saw, for instance. What type of saw blades you use, I don't know. I just go do it, and if it looks good, I keep working on it. And so I apologize for not having. I've never written down stuff. Don't have time for that. I just keep shooting and shooting and shooting. And in this case, for instance, here we're using. I'm using my painting with light again. This is a thing called a light brush, and it's just, again, like I said, a flashlight, 300-watt flashlight, and the lights inside the building are lit up in a couple of cases. And then you would put this little light. It's a fiber optic type situation, and it has a little snoot, like about the size of a soda straw. and you blast the light through that soda straw, more or less, and you light certain areas, and you just paint it. For instance, if you look at the highlight in the side of this building here, showing off the brickwork, that's just a little bit of maybe 2 or 3 seconds of putting that light over that area. And you
So
can do
would
this.
would that be considered a pinhole photography?
No, no. No, I've never done pinhole. I've always wanted to try it, but it wasn't one of these things that when I saw the results, oftentimes they're not sharp. They sort of get sometimes more depth of field than what you actually need. We're covering here, this particular shot, depth of field is probably a couple of feet. So I was probably at f16, f22 with a view camera, which is about like f8 on your typical point and shoot camera.
We do have a question from JD. JD, what is your question?
Hi, Bob. First of all, I went looking on your website prior to this presentation as I was working on the eMag, and I saw your name come across. Some amazing work you have there. Absolutely amazing. What I'd like to understand from you is, as you go through these pictures, can you speak to your thought process and what you see within the picture that you like to describe and pull out? What stories do you see behind it? What do you like to tell? What story do you like to tell with the pictures? And what the thought process behind it is. Would love to understand that.
Well, the thought process is to create entertainment. That's the big thing, and to show what's there, and try to create the realism as close as you can to what in this case, what old Winston Link saw, or might have seen. Now, this is obviously not one of his shots, but the imitation of the old man at the gas pump with a convertible in front of it. That's one of his shots, someplace. And obviously, I didn't want to create the whole thing. I don't want to tear my layout down and rebuild it to what his looked like. But it's just a scene that I saw. I built this thing years ago. I photographed it several times, and every time I do it, I try to make it look different. And so this becomes the fact that photographers are, I guess you would say, short attention span to some degree. We love something for a day or two or a month or a year, and then we go on to moving on and do something else in the same vein. And then maybe 5 years they'll come back to it and say, "Hey, that was a pretty nice shot. Let's keep that." So I put it back in the show, you know. But there's no rhyme or rhythm to it. I'm a commercial photographer, so I pretty much do what my clients want me to do, you know, when I'm on the assignment. In this case, it's something I just saw, and I used to be a photographer for the National Association of Estigators Association, and the magazine comes out 6 times a year. I would do assignments, just self-assignments. I would assign myself a project. And for instance, this shot here, you can realize the top area up there in the black sky is great for putting in the masthead and the herald and you know, what's featured on top of the magazine, just like Model Railroad or RMC would do. I leave space for this sort of thing, and you know, every once in a while I get somebody will tell me, say, "That's a wonderful shot. Do you have a backward version of it?" And no, I don't.
Hey, Bob, what is William Graham here? He's our live show host. How long does it take you to set up a particular shot? And I mean, like, you know, and that's a good question from Bill there. You know, and that was one of my questions. If you're gonna, it takes you a while to set up a particular shot, and let's say the picture you're looking at now. What is your number one when you're focusing in on that or going to set that picture, take that shot? What is your number one particular thing that you're looking at to get to catch someone's eye, I guess?
Well, again, you have to have, and this is very prominent if you ever do any video work. You have to have a hero. You have to have a reason for that photograph to be taken in the first place. And this time it's you know, the white smoke billowing out of a big steam engine going by. Oh, and by the way, we have some old people in front of this old general store on the left, and we got a young couple in a convertible, and some old guy giving him $1 worth of gas, and there's a couple of I think a hanger-on guy is hanging on the other place. That's probably a saloon or a general store with you some beers being passed around. I think there's a hooker on the stairway on the left side over there. Actually, there's a couple of them over there. That's my house of ill repute over there, the red light district in this little town. And so that's something I want people to go into, rather than say, hey, this is a neat steam locomotive. Hey, I can go in there and I can see this going on and that going on and that going on there. But I want them to be minor details.
What did you do? Did you Photoshop the smoke in there?
That is actually borrowed from one of old Winston Link's photographs out of his book, yes. I just went in there and scanned it on a flatbed scanner and picked it up and used it. Now, I do not do real good smoke. I have a number of photographs published, and I keep looking at other people's work, and I say, man, that guy did much better smoke than I can do. So I'm going to learn how to smoke very shortly. I found a seminar online of another photographer I've met, I think. He does some wonderful smoke. And so I'm not, rather than stealing his work, I'm just going to learn how to do it probably a little bit better. But this is the actual real smoke that he did way back in the 50s, I guess, is when he was doing most of his work. So I borrowed it, and he doesn't mind. Go to the next one. This is a cover photograph. This is a double-page spread for S Helper Service. They came out with they started out with some freight cars, the typical Chinese ready-to-run kind of stuff, and then they came out with some diesels, and then they decided to do a steam engine. And this is a E-Class, E27, I believe it is, which is a B&O prototype. And this is one of my final jobs on film. It was shot with a 2.25 with a camera called a Fuji 680. And the reason I did that was because I could shoot a Polaroid ahead of time and look at it and get the right amount of streaking without shooting a lot of film. And we still, at that time, we were still shooting a lot of film because it was in big film, larger format cameras.
Is that train actually in motion?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
We had a devil of a time. The people that designed this locomotive in China, the company S Helper Service was always given a beginner engineer, and so he was like, it was his first project, this sort of thing, and they had a devil of a time getting this thing, to be saleable, and they finally got one that actually worked and was received over here without being broken up. There were a lot of parts broken off most of the engines initially till they got the packing right and all that kind of thing. This was a several-year project for these people, and it's actually sunk them when it came right down to it. But the idea was that this darn thing moves, and it's real. It's not some kind of stock shot from a New York Central system in 1952 when this engine was still running. This is not a HO gauge mock-up or something like that, or dummied up things. In the past, we've used chunks of wood and put ladders on them and painted them up and put paper wrappers on because the real thing was not made yet. In this case, it was with a few defects, but it was made, and we wanted to show that. Now, imagine this thing split in half. It's a horizontal format, but where the rear of the tender, probably the New York part, and the Santa Fe reefer, were on the back page of this catalog, and the steam engine in motion would be the front page. And again, I left room up on top for your masthead and information and 19 or 2006 catalog or whatever it was. I don't even know what year it was, but that was the concept behind this. And this client was good enough to just trust me. They said, we need something great. So this is what I call great at the time. You may like it, you may hate it, I don't know, but it's what I came up with. I liked it. I got paid. And here's my particular, this is the same engine that I own. I do trade out with these people, and it's actually in the same location, just a different angle. And in this case, I did a black and white conversion, and which is pretty easy to do. Then I used a filter that sort of fuzzes out the edges a little bit and gives a little bit of motion to it. It's almost like a zoom effect, and also I did use a bit of infrared on that thing, try and make it just look a little bit weird, a little bit different. And just again, just something I wanted to play with. When I get bored, I start playing with things. Now here's a, most of us probably, if you're chasing trains, you've probably gone on a railfan trip or two. And here I'm trying to blend, you know, in this case it's the Union Pacific's Challenger, the 3985, which I bought by mistake in some ways. And then I decided to do a railfan trip with it. Staging it at one of the corners of my layout. And so I want to do a sunset shot where the train's coming back in the early evening, and they put a modern SD60 and SD40 diesels off on the side and the siding, let this special train come through, and there's a story behind that. And again, this was I entered this in a contest and got a prize, but it wasn't really the reason for this sort of thing. It was just really to have fun doing it. Again, this was shot with a Fuji 680 camera, which is a very large camera. It's about the size of, oh gosh, how would I describe it? It's a G-scale locomotive in an HO gauge spot. I was crammed in here so tight that I could hardly move, and so it was a triumph just getting the photograph done from being able to wiggle in there and wiggle out. I had the problem is that I never grew up, but I grew out over the years, and so areas that I used to be able to get into are now becoming kind of tight, which is something you need to think about when you do your modeling. When you go scout your friend's layout or you on the NMRA tours and stuff, look at it, photograph the aisleways and that sort of thing, and make room for them. Now here's something that, again, I try to do once in a while, just kind of do an effect shot. I was doing something else, I'm sure, and came across this scene that I kind of like. I built all these reefers, and I was playing with a new camera lens that I had bought, which is I think Olympus makes them. I know Canon makes several. Nikon makes 3 or 4. They're called tilt shift perspective control lenses. These are very expensive lenses for what you get. They're not automatic by any means. They're manual, and you have to stop them down to the f-stop you're going to use, which is a real pain when you get used to all the automation we've had. This is a manual lens that goes back to the design is is basically a view camera lens. What I wanted to do is just emphasize the brakeman who's hanging on there as he's being he just made a cut of cars there, and they're pulling out, and he's going to go along with the cars. But I want to put emphasis on that little brakeman guy, and the heck with everything else. It's not important, but just trying to show the effect of it. This was an 85mm lens, and probably cropped a little bit too as we go by here. I would love to have the extra $2,000 to buy a 24mm version of this thing, but it's not in the cards right now. So if any of you guys want to do some crowdfunding, send me some money. I'll shoot you some great shots because it can do it. Now here's my layout again. This was for a cover of a directory, and it just shows you just kind of a different perspective. I normally don't like to shoot up this high, but the fact that the only way you can do this and show a lot of freight cars or a lot of cars, a lot of action, is to get up high. And you realize that anytime you see a photograph, Morning Sun book or something like this, and they show a yard, it's going to be from up high, usually. You get down low, and all of a sudden you have this long, narrow, 1-inch by 14-inch type image, and it doesn't work in a book very well. This works pretty well. Again, it's busy enough you can put your copy right on top of it up there, and where the structures are and stuff. Again, it's just it just shows you the railroad that I have and that I spent the last 25 years building.
We got another question here from Bill Van Litten again. Do you do any outdoor diorama photos? And if you do, what type of filters do you use for high sun?
Well, I'm in Texas. We have about a month in the spring and a month in the fall to do this sort of thing. Uh, After that, you're either in nasty overcast weather, it doesn't work real well, or it's so darn hot you're not going to go outside for very long. And so, do I do it? Yes. Do I do it often? No. I probably only have been outside photographing stuff maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 20 years. So, and it's not being lazy, it's just being, when you're 95 degrees outside and the humidity is 90%, dragging this stuff outside and putting it in the Ken Patterson mode of stuff is not my cup of tea. I have a studio. I pay rent on it every month. I have a portable sky background. It's on a 4x8 sheet of masonite. I use that in the place of the real stuff. Now I'd love to go out and do that sort of thing, but we also have a lot of telephone lines around here. Being in a city, it's not fun to try to find a place. And you get out there and the wind blows everything off, and you get freight cars and stuff crashing in the ground. And again, I'm working with sometimes clients' product, and it just really doesn't work. My yard doesn't work for that. I've got to go someplace. So I would love to do more of it. I just need to move to a place like Idaho.
Yeah.
Where you can do it for what, maybe 3 months out of the year, 4 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. The big problem is that you have to have a blank area, and your trees and your telephone poles are fine, but they have to be way in the distance. And your trees have to be way in the distance, so they look like model trees. In this case, you're taking a real tree, making it look like a model. And so, and therefore, you probably need a wide-angle lens most of the time. And I sort of preferring, I switch back and forth. I'll be real happy with wide-angle lenses. Like I said, my 24 has been my favorite for years and years and years. Then all of a sudden, I got this 85 millimeter, and I can do some nice stuff with that. And so it's my own personal work is what I favor. Now I wanted to show this shot, and just basically because I've now, I still have this Fuji camera. It has a digital back on now, but it's a monster, and so I don't take it out very often. But I have a Nikon 800 and a 700 that are both becoming vintage now all of a sudden. But I went and got myself a little Nikon called a 7700, whatever it is, 7700, I guess, and with the idea of carrying depth of field easier than having to go out and buy a $2,000 PC lens. And so this is at f8, which it's amazing me. I'm learning stuff all the time. If I stop learning, I quit. And so this was shot on my layout again. It's just the idea that you can get depth of field from maybe 2 inches in front of the camera lens back to about 8 foot beyond that at f8. So you couldn't do that with a view camera. You have to be at f64 or f90 with all kinds of swings and tilts. So this is pretty amazing to me. What you have to worry about, though, is that when you do this, you tilt your camera down just a little bit, because focus is in a plane. It's wherever the lens, whatever position the lens is in, the focus will be carried out. And so if you want the focus to be from the foreground to the background, you tilt the camera down a little bit, and you angle the lens down. But what that's going to do is going to kill you for things like telephone poles will start leaning to the right and some will lean to the left, and buildings will lean to the right and buildings will lean to the left if you're in a wide-angle mode, and even a telephoto for that matter. So in this case, you have to go into Photoshop or some other program that has the ability to straighten things back out again. And when you do that, you'll find out that you probably didn't shoot it wide enough, because now when you do all this shifting and tilting, you start cutting off stuff. And that's a little scary sometimes if you're not used to doing it. I've got caught several times this way. You end up cutting off something that you really want to keep. In this case, this shot has a problem in that there's sort of two heroes, and that's the only reason I really don't like it in some ways. And that the locomotive off to the left is a hero, and the dude in the gondola there is the other hero. And I probably should have lit it a little differently, but
But
to
you know,
emphasize.
I've got one question from Philip Wyman here. Yeah, it might be a good question for the photo that you got here. How do you do photos of getting off highlighted areas? I mean, when you focus in on something like this picture here, something in the background is going to be blurry, wouldn't it be? Versus something that's up close, right?
Well, again, that's what we call depth of field, and that's
Okay.
the ability to either create depth of field where things right up front are pretty sharp and things in back are pretty sharp. Now in the background, I'm sure you take those trees behind the engine house back that they're probably not tack sharp, but they're good enough to represent the tree properly. Now other times when I have, for instance, that brakeman hanging on the side of that reefer, I wanted very little depth of field. If you ever get an informational sheet from Kalmbach, they'll tell you, oh, stop your lens all the way down and get all the depth of field you want. Well, I think in that case it would have ruined the shot. I have a thing, and I have it a recent copy in my wallet. It's called Artist License. It sits next to my library card and my driver's license, and it gives me permission to do things that I want to do. Now, maybe nobody's going to pay for it, but it gives me the permission to try something. And that's one of the benefits of photography, and especially with digital stuff nowadays. You can go shoot 2 or 3 shots of your layout or somebody else's layout, turn around, pop it into your computer, and say, hey, I like this, I hate this, I hate this, I want to modify this, and I can do this. And that gives you the option to, to do these things and go back and shoot it again. This particular engine house, I photographed at one time. It's got lights in it, and I photographed it in a night scene. Got up a little higher from it, and put a blue filter over the lens, and the light bulbs, of course, inside these real yellow little 1.5 volt things, and we made a wonderful shot there. It was totally different flavor. So you have kind of plain vanilla here, and the other one was a Blues Magoo kind of thing, and it made a magazine cover.
Hey, Bob, this is from Paul Crosscomb. I hope I got his last name right. But do you like to work with black and white or color the best? What do you prefer?
Well, black and white if you've been in color for so many years, and I have, and I grew up in black and white, obviously. I shot my hometown newspaper when I was 14, 15 years old. Black and white is a lot harder to do than color. There's a thing called contrast. And if you look at old black and white movies, these old romance things that you find on the cheap cable television programs, they lit strongly, and the lighting was more dramatic. The shadows were blacker and deeper, and that's how you had to do things back in those days. Now, in the shot that you're seeing now from Model Railroader, is the exact opposite. It's lit rather flatly, which Model Railroader prefers. They don't want anything too contrasty. Which contrasty means black shadows and white highlights. They want things in the medium because this has to go to a printing press, and when they don't want to fight with the printer to get the best color, so they just do it kind of in the medium area and let things fly. But in color, your contrast is your color. You've got silver, you've got gold, you've got some green back there, you got some weathered black on the trestle system, and that's your contrast. In black and white, I think this would look terrible.
Philip Weimer has another question on how do you keep the glare down on photos, or how do you get rid of the glare?
Well, sometimes you want a little bit of that, but normally I see the light, and you need to play pool, or the angle of reflection equals the angle of whatever. There's a mathematical thing about that. I probably have forgotten it now, but you just look. if you have a light source, in this case, I was using strobe lights, which have what they call modeling light built into them. I shoot most of my layouts with strobe lights. Is about 50, 60 pounds of stuff, 4 power packs and 6 heads. It's a load of stuff, but you can see the light, and this is the great thing about digital cameras again. You see it on your screen. If you got a flare someplace, in this case here, there's a little bit of flare on the headlight or the windshield up front. Well, gosh, that happens in real life too. So, but if you're shooting something like a black glossy locomotive, and you put a light on it, you're going to get a glare on that thing. So you have to move the light around to the point where it does not interfere with it. And you'll find that lighting is a compromise. It's what makes photography, but it's also often a compromise. And you would like to have the lighting maybe a little stronger, or a little higher, or a little lower. And because it's on a layout, you can't put the light there. There's scenery there, and you're not going to, take a shovel and start smashing the scenery up to get a light in there. So you do what you can with what you got, and whatnot. Now this particular one was it's a special version of this thing from Model Railroader. This was Gil Freitag's layout here in Houston, and Gil has been published in every magazine in the world. And I said to him, I think we should be in Model Railroader. He says, they won't talk to me. He says, I won't be in Model Railroad unless you give me the cover. Well, we got the cover. And that was, 2003, something like that. And it took me a while to do it, but I pulled out some strings, and some of the best photography I've ever done has been on this feature. And Gil and I are good friends, and his layout is magnificent, and he's famous all over the country for for his work in all kinds of things, whatnot. So
I think I've asked this question, but Andy Gilmore from Australia, you were talking to him just before the show started.
Right.
Where do you place your focal point? Center or off center of the frame?
Well, it has to make me feel comfortable. Now you're working, in this case, this is a print-up magazine, and so you have to fit in this 8.5 by 11 size. Now, if it was my own, print in my house or something like this, I may give it more room on the left side. In fact, there may have been more room there. I don't know. It's getting a little tight there. But I also wanted to show that this was a long train, and the curve was important to me. If you push the locomotives back in the tunnel a little more, I think you lose the effect of this long, gentle curve. So again, you sort of fight back and forth. And indeed, oftentimes I will shoot 3 versions of the same shot. It's set up. That locomotive is powered. It's going to move just with a advance of the throttle. The film or the digital representation of film is cheap. Let's go for it. I'd also oftentimes I'll take this lighting scene, which I think is, like I said, it's flat, it's doable, it's commercially saleable, all that kind of thing. But maybe I would tune the lights down a little bit more and give it a little more shadow. The only trouble is where does the shadow go? And so you fight with things. But I would, if I had all the time in the world, I'd probably try another lighting version of this thing. And sometimes you can just take a light and move it away a foot or two, and it will change dramatically. One thing about lighting is that the closer you have the light to the product, in this case the Hero, which is the Rio Grande Diesel, the closer you have that light, the more uneven it'll be from the foreground to the background. In other words, maybe if you move the light in closer, those locomotives will be lit up rather well, but the scenery in the background will get pretty dark, and that doesn't happen in real life usually. You don't normally have a shadow from a cloud on the scenery back there while the engine is lit up nicely. It does happen, but it's not something that is usual. So you back your lights off, and things get much more even. On the other hand, I like to create shadows whenever I can, and so I use a smaller light source. In other words, my lights are typically, they have a 5-inch, approximately a 5-inch opening. Well, oftentimes I'll put an umbrella on there, or what we call a box light, or aim the light up at the ceiling and bounce the rays of light all over the room. That makes a flat, even light, and that's great for, again, for model railroader. What I would probably do a little more stronger compromise if this was going to be online or my own personal photograph. Again, I have to think, as a commercial photographer, I have to think about what's going to make my client happy. And you know, everybody says, "Hey, this is a wonderful shot." And I say, "Yeah, it's pretty darn good, but you know, I have a better version at the house," or something like that. Is what I'd like to have said. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I don't recall. Again,
I know a guy that would just love that picture right there.
it's for sale.
It's for, there you go, Dave Vallejos. Hey, so I got a question for you. It says model railroader. So, and when you and I got into a chat here a while back when we did our pre-show, or to get you used to the hangout thing, do you actually, I mean, do you do much for model railroader?
I'm trying to think now. I think the last thing that was published was about 2 years ago. There was a gentleman down in Galveston area who had a lot of money once upon a time and built this fabulous layout, or had it built. And he was a good modeler, but he had, you know, a lot of the company work and everything done for him, and track laying done. He had a big, magnificent Digitrack system. He didn't put that in. He didn't even know how to run it when it got done. Now he has Alzheimer's, and the layout was torn out about 2 months ago or so. But I spent 3 days down there photographing it. Wonderful layout, and it appeared in model railroader. I had one maybe a year before that. A gentleman up in Springfield, Illinois, who was a good friend of mine. It was an S-scale layout, and it got published. Now, I'm doing work mostly right now for great model railroads. I've got 2 issues in the can. One of them is about 3 years old, and the other one I just got a check in for a month or so ago. So it's a layout up in Minnesota, in oh gosh, I'm trying to think of one of the nicer areas of Minneapolis, on the west side of the city. I can't think of it right now. Wonderful CB&Q layout. And then I have another layout up in the Dallas area, very famous fellow named Chip Romick. And if you guys are into operation, you'll find a lot of YouTube stuff on his layout and how he operates, that sort of thing. And it's a fabulous layout. Again, he had a whole crew of about 20 people that come in and build for him, which is magnificent. I mean, I wish I could get people to come in and build for me. And he just gives them ice cream and cake once in a while. But it's a fabulous layout. But it's waiting. It's waiting in the can, because there are a lot of people who've got nice layouts, and because everybody's a photographer nowadays, I got to compete with these guys. And again, these are all in the can. I've got a layout just west of here in a small town. A fella is building a beautiful Santa Fe layout. You know, the trouble is, he's not finished with it yet. He's an actual railroader. He's I believe, a conductor for the BNSF, and so he doesn't get a lot of time off. And he's got a freight yard to finish up, and but he does wonderful backgrounds. So he'll have an in right there, because Andy Sprandio is a Santa Fe nut, and so he sort of prefers to feature that whenever possible. But I'm waiting. And I've got a layout hopefully due for Model Railroad Hobbyist. My first time working with them. The layout's pretty much in the can too. I've shot some video that is supposed to go along with it, and I have a little bit of trouble with that. But it's pretty much ready to go too. These things take me about a year, from start to finish. It's not unusual for me to ask the builder, the owner, whatever, can we finish up a little more on this? Can we do some more scenery on this? And if he's willing to do it, I'd rather wait and get something better. Now, other times it's like, you fly into some place and you do what's there, and you got a flight the next morning to catch out of there, and so you do what you can. I've always delivered. They typically use anywhere from 6 to a dozen shots, so I'll deliver normally twice that much. And I've never had to come up and say, "Hey, you're missing a bunch of stuff," or "There's not enough there for an article." And I always believe in giving them more than what they bargained for, or what they paid for anyhow. But I do reserve the rights to sell these photographs afterward. I own my own work, and when they use it again, they pay me a few dollars once in a while. So we have a good relationship for the most part. They're fussy. I did one article for RMC before they went belly up, and I had they were a little slow on payment, and I have to make a living, so we parted ways based on that. What I'm going to show you here is another catalog cover. This is on my railroad again, and it's for El Selper service again. This is when they brought their F3s out, I believe. Yes, the F3s just arrived. And again, if you look at that photograph, it's split down the middle, pretty much. The right side is the front cover. The back side is the rear cover. Now, we started a little idea there once, is that the new products that were not quite ready yet, not ready for prime time, we would sneak them in there. And if you see a Santa Fe war bonnet in the background, that's an F7, which was just about ready to be introduced. We snuck that in there. We also stuck a steam engine in there, because this was a predecessor of the one that we saw before. And so this was almost like a contest. People would say, "Hey, I saw an F7 back there. I saw a war bonnet, and I know they're not making it now. That means you're going to have one." And I would build up a lot of enthusiasm for their product. And I think they sold a lot based on the prior reservation kind of thing. So I'm quite pleased with that. Now this one here, if you guys remember cameras, and I talked about a 4x5 view camera, this was shot with an 8x10 view camera. But the film was 8 inches by 10 inches. It's a monstrous camera. I just sold it. It went off on eBay just a couple 3 days ago. Finally got rid of it. But when you shoot this stuff, and you can take a magnifying glass and you look down there and you can read every little bit of information on the side of that car. That's wonderful. It took me a day of setup to get this thing shot. Now, I could pretty much do the same thing with an Nikon, which is disgusting, because I used to work real hard, and now I can do it a lot easier, which is good for me. But it also makes the competition a little bit easier. It's easier for people to compete with me that don't have the skills that I used to have, or used to have to employ. That's the difficult part about it. But again, here we had to have fairly even lighting. We wanted to show all the product. We want to show it being colorful, being sellable, that sort of thing. So we're trying to do a Sears Roebuck catalog kind of look to it. Now here the war bonnets have come out, and a magazine wanted to feature these in the cover, and so he said, "Bob, do a cover for us." And so I said, "Okay." And the thing is, here we did not have headlights in these things yet. This is still a pre-production model, but so I retouched the headlights in. The classification lights were green. I put those in there. I lit up this 37L number board thing, and I rearranged some buildings to give it kind of a leaving Chicago kind of look to it. These buildings, some of them are not there in real life, but I also wanted to cover up to where I could not light the back of the area too well, and I didn't want to, because we didn't have a lot of Santa Fe type cars, and so I put that old Plasticville signal tower up there, just kind of to obscure the area. So I cheat a little bit when I have to. For this one here, you'll notice one thing: the shadows on the box cars on this Union Pacific engine are pretty prominent. So I use a stronger light here. The lights also, the little interlocking tower there. So again, I started playing with lighting a little bit more, getting a little stronger. It didn't hurt anything. We don't have any major flares on anything. A little bit of glare on the headlight there, or the windshield again. I could retouch that out if I needed to. It wasn't a big deal. Without highlights, it looks duller. You want strong. Any photograph should have a light color or a light shade and a dark shade, and lots of them in the middle. Again, the headlights and the silver paint are the highlights, and the dark box cars and the darker background are the shadow areas. And you want to try and balance them out a little bit. Now here we have production models of these things again. What they did was they were the first model company ever to actually put chrome the way the Santa Fe actually did. They actually had chrome sides, and that was one of their selling features. So I staged getting these locomotives ready for a run, and so the crew's working on them, they're scrubbing down the side. But you notice how the men are reflected in the chrome. That again was a feature. I worked pretty hard getting that one done. They were pleased with it.
Well, Bob, I'm gonna interrupt you here for just a bit. We had some pretty good questions there. Running along pretty good. We've had up to about 18 viewers. I think that's including the guys that are in the panel. I just want to remind everybody, for all the viewers and everybody that's watching the show, or watch the show after, when they go to the YouTube channel, to keep checking the YouTube, modelbuilders.com, for all the latest information on the live shows and the presentation, plus the eMag. I didn't bring up at the beginning of the show, we do a Thursday night general hangout. Johnny Reb does that from Southeastern Rails. He opens up at about 9 o'clock on Thursdays. It's just a general. Once we get a good panel going, we bring up a topic to discuss. It's always model railroading, to do with model railroading, that is. We got JD in here tonight, and maybe he could bring up, if JD, if you don't mind, bring up a little bit about maybe some new stuff that might be happening in the eMag in the next month or next issue, or about what, if the guys haven't seen this month's issue, maybe you can discuss about what's in this month's issue.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, dude. Basically, for those who've seen it, you'll realize that I always write a little editor's note there, and the theme is loosely collected on weathering and customization for this current issue, which came out last Friday. And it centers around looking at various techniques for weathering, Gino's technique for using alcohol with powders to create washes, as well as other techniques. So, and one of the things that we've added into the e-magazine, or as known as the eMag, is the food for thought section. It's sort of an opinion piece where you could provide an opinion, and if we think it's controversial enough or thought-provoking enough, we'll publish it, and we solicit feedback from the community, what you think. And then we'll take a look at the feedback and publish a few of those pieces as well as counterbalance. The next issue that's coming up, and this is a bi-monthly magazine, is in July. And that theme is basically working on looking at how the next generation of modelers can come into this great hobby. And what are some of the barriers around that? What are some of the challenges? What is some of the work that the younger generation has done? And I know within this community we have several people, very young modelers and high school modelers and college-age modelers that have done some fantastic work. And some of their work has already been featured in the eMag. And so we're going to center around that. So if anybody out there knows, if somebody's working with kids, by all means, let us know. We'd like to hear from you. And further down, as we develop the themes, one theme builds on top of the other for the eMag. And we're going to be further looking at working with sound, on engines, working with lights and signals, incorporating the DCC topic in, and building off what some of the Hangout presentations are.
Thanks, JD.
Thank you.
You know, I want to bring up too. You know, we've done a little bit a different thing on the presentation. You know, like I said, we're doing the first Tuesday that it will be the Gino Sharp from Birmingham South Division. If you guys have not checked out his videos, do so. He's been doing some new stuff on the new layout that he's doing. So he's the first Tuesday of every month. Troy from Pacific South North Central, he is going to be doing a presentation the second Tuesday of every month. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, go do so, because he's got some really good videos on some turnouts that he's done. He's in scale, really good stuff. And then, of course, the third Tuesday of the month will be me. And then Gino and Mike, they'll be doing their tech show on the 4th. And any of the offset months where there's 5 Tuesdays of that month, I will be doing the 5th one. Our next Tuesday, which is the 26th, next Tuesday, Gino and Mike will be doing some DCC stuff. Basically, the show next Tuesday will be on DC versus DCC. So basically, that might be a good show for you guys that are in DC that are thinking about going into the DCC. So it kind of gives you some more different things to look at when the presentations come along. So, but further ado, we'll go ahead and let Bob continue the presentation. So far, he's doing a. I love his work. I really do.
Thank you. I've got another bowl, probably 6 or 8 shots to do, and after that we'll go totally to questions or whatever. What I'm going to show you here is a panoramic. I haven't done a lot of them. Again, I'm typically tied into, I do commercial work, I'm typically tied into 8.5 by 11, either horizontal or vertical type situation. And but I'm a Milwaukee Road fan, and I've seen some photographs of some of their nostalgia books, and so I did this scene here. We have some of the older generation stuff, your F units and your switcher, along with a U-boat that a friend of mine agreed to paint for me. He's a wonderful painter and did some work for me. But again, this is these are either 2 or 3 photographs put together, so it's not a elaborate panoramic, but it is. And this is where we're able to use. The problem you have is people have a tendency to sometimes think a wide-angle shot will do everything, but it also creates distortion. Your round things become oval-shaped, and again, if you tilt the camera up or down a little bit, everything vertical will be coming either swing to the right or swing to the left, and it gives you this, high on LSD kind of look to it. And I don't know anything about that. I never did that as a kid or a young guy. But in this case here, I was able to use probably a 60 or 80 millimeter lens, 60, maybe 85, and did probably three shots side by side. And when you put them into Photoshop and do a panoramic blending together, it came out nearly perfect. There's some evidence I'll show you, I think, one shot coming up that it did not work. And so a lot of times you have to go over this and do it. There's several options that that you can employ when you go through this procedure. And if it doesn't work out, you throw it away, start another version of it, and you may be more successful. But there's no way of knowing ahead of time, as far as I know, which one will work for you. And this is what I'm here. This is my railroad. It's about almost a 270 degree, maybe 300 degree panoramic, and it's about 4 shots, I believe, put together. And you see the white kind of up and down motion areas there that when the program puts it together, you know, that's one of the limitations of it. Now, it did a pretty good job, but up near the ceiling, the straight lines don't line up, and so I probably would need to go back in there and do it again. But in this case, I was just doing it for my own personal use. It's not me for publication, that sort of thing. But again, it shows you, what can be done. And this probably didn't take me but 5 minutes to shoot it. I was just trying to show some of my buddies online that what the railroad room looked like. We had a discussion. I built my own building way back in 1985. This is above my garage, and I put 10-foot ceilings in with the idea of being able to display some of my photography and some artwork and occasional lantern and sign, that kind of thing, above the, and still have a nice sky background, which that's one of the benefits of having a little bit of taller ceiling. Now here's another version where we cropped a lot of the white stuff off. This is the final presentation version that I made up for the guys. In this case, my whole room is lit with both fluorescent lights and with spotlights. And when I do the photography, I use the spotlights occasionally, and then I also supplement them with some color matching lights to put shadows in to emphasize things. Other times I'll turn them all off and use strobe lights again. This is the option I have, of having all this stuff and having paid for it sometimes years ago. I can pull the options that I want and use them when I feel is more appropriate, or the purpose of the photograph. If it's going to be online to show somebody real quickly, I'll just use available light, or available light with a small spotlight off to the side, put some emphasis on it. When I'm shooting for publication for an ad, then I bring out all the guns. I'm going to have some money coming in. Somebody will throw some coins in my collection box eventually, and it'll be worthwhile. Now we get in this thing that's probably important to all you guys, is you've all heard about the Helicon filter, image stacking, whatever you want to call it. I have two versions of it. I have the Helicon, which has all of a sudden disappeared from my Macintosh system. Apparently it's not compatible with the latest OS update. But Photoshop also has their own version of it. I don't know if one's better than the other, but certainly both of them work. I've seen some advantages of the Helicon. Is a little more, it gives you a better final image without a lot of work. The Photoshop version, you've got to do a little bit of tweaking with it. But at any rate, here's an example of it. I did I think this is a 7-part series to get it, to get depth of field. What you want to do here is that you don't want to stop the lens down too far, and how far down is subject to debate. I've tried it a couple of different ways, and I really haven't settled on what I prefer yet. But I probably shot this, for instance, this is probably shot with a normal lens, give or take a little bit, probably a 35 millimeter would be my guess, at about f5.6. If you stop it down to f32, f22, which this lens does go down that far, there's not much use in doing it. But what you want is a very tack sharp area, and then you move it, and you move it, and you move it, and you move it, and do exposure. Every time you move your focus a little bit, and eventually you'll get it down to where everything will come together properly. And let's see what the next one is here. Okay, now I've gone in, maybe made 4 exposures, and stopped on the locomotive, which is my hero. I did some versions beyond that, showing the boxcars and the buildings in the back and sharp. And then I decided that's as far as I want to go. I want to get the depth of field from the front of that, the track going into the engine, or at the roundhouse area there, and stop where that locomotive is. The other is just atmosphere, it's just flavor, and it's nice to have some flavor, but it's not, it may detract from the hero part of it. But that's what I would do now if I was to have an assignment like this. Again, it's just how you feel about things. Uh, you do things as much as you can. You can't go back to it. Now here's another version of it. This is the other two shots were done with a Helicon filter several years ago. This was done with the same images using the Adobe version of it. And this one here has some problems in that the version I used, or the procedure I used, gave me this white area on top, and it also gives you some blurring area where the Union Pacific was at. And that's because you're stacking all these layers on top of each other, and they're highlights, and it will have a tendency to blur highlights. Also, there's some corrugated steel pipe back out here in a gondola, and it sort of made those kind of fuzzy. But yet you go down to the bottom, the trucks on this locomotive, and they're tack sharp, absolutely sharp, and the track is pretty sharp all the way from a couple inches from the lens all the way to the turntable. So again, sometimes these things work for you extremely well. Other times they don't. But see, you have two versions of it. I need to find the other version of it and get an updated version, to put it back in my computer. Now here is another version, and this I think it's a Photoshop version. Back for a little further, and this is not the same color, unfortunately. I didn't match the color, but again, it does you something that you could not do in prior years unless you went through very painful view camera operations there.
Hey, Bob, Log and Local, that's JD. So do you use a wider shot than you need and crop later in order to stack properly, or
Yes.
And eliminate the blurred edges?
Yeah.
Blurred edges.
The garbage.
The garbage, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a wrapper on a sandwich. You get rid of that garbage afterward, and you just gobble the sandwich down, or the TV tray or something like that. Yeah, well, the Helicon filter automatically crops it for you. You'll lose maybe 7 to 10% of your image. You can kind of count on that a little bit. Now the Adobe version gives you everything that's there, but it's fuzzy, and so you really can't use it. And so, and that's the major differences I found in it. What I did find out is that if you're going to do a stacking of something, a locomotive with a headlight on, or even street lights or something like that, you only turn on the headlight or the number board lights or that sort of thing when you're focused on that hero. So street lights may be a problem. They may get fuzzy. I mean, really fuzzy.
Troy from Pacific North Central, does it matter? I mean, how is the LED lighting for taking photos or and videos?
Well, I think it's going to work out fine. I've got a set coming in on Thursday. I just bought a set, small set. Lighting is lighting. It's a matter of having the whole area lit with the same color of light. And so you can't mix fluorescent light and daylight, for instance. If you're in a railroad room, it's got a couple of windows in it, block them out or come back at night and shoot them. That's what I do. I shoot at night. And I used to have an outside mercury vapor light, and one time I did a long exposure, and I could not figure out where all this green was coming from, and it was a mercury vapor light outside my window. We no longer have that light. So it surprised me because I was just enough light to see by. You did a long exposure, and I was doing locomotives in motion, so I wanted the headlights to streak, and they did. But then I had this green overcast to everything, and that looked terrible. I came back and reshot it again. But LEDs, what you have to look for, and I have some in my spotlights have been changed from typical tungsten lights. I went to the compact fluorescent spotlight kind of things, and I've got about half of those are that way. And I put in some LEDs, and the trouble with those is that they, just like the fluorescence, the color rendition is not exactly what it should be yet. You have to look for what they call a CRI rating. And I'm just starting to read about this now, and it should be above 80. Most of your typical lights are in the 50s and 60s range. So if you go to Home Depot and buy some LED type lights, they're probably not going to be the color rendition, and that's what CRI stands for, is not going to be correct. It may be okay. Again, if you're shooting photographs for yourself and for your buddies on YouTube or whatever, it's okay. You know, you can go out and you can do photography with light bulbs or light fixtures from Home Depot again for $3. You know, aluminum fixture with a plastic little trouble light kind of thing, as I call them. You can use that for lighting. Nobody says you can't. There's no rules about photography. It's what you figure out and what works for you, and that's, you know, some experimentations or talking to people, getting references, that sort of thing. I've always liked strobe lights, with the exception that you can't get smoke coming out of a steam engine with the old technique was to stick some cotton ball in your stack and attach a little string to it with a little stick, and you can wiggle that string around and you get the fuzzy smoke, and that you get some nice stuff that way. That's the only disadvantage of using strobe lights, because they stop instantly. But what I like about the strobe lights is that they're fairly cool. If I came in here with 1,000-watt light bulbs in the Texas temperature, things melt. I'm already.
Got a question from Johnny from Southeast Rails. If someone was going to, I'm going to expand his question here. I'll probably hear it over this one. But anyways, if somebody's going to get started in taking some photos of their layout, and they want to get as close as professional as you can, or let's say they want to start doing some how-to. Maybe you can answer this too on how-to videos. For one, what type inexpensive camera could they buy to do still shots and stuff like that of the layout? And for two, what kind of a camcorder if they're going to do video?
Okay. When I got into, I bought my first, other than a family, I guess it was a Super 8, video camera of some kind. I think a little Canon. I went out and bought a Panasonic, and the Panasonic video camera, which works on a tape system, would take stills, but the quality of the still was so terrible. But that was going to be the future, and this is 5-6 years ago now, fairly recently, where the motion picture camera was going to shoot stills. Now it's sort of the other way around, where the still camera shoots video, and you find some really high-end advertisements being done on your CBS, NBC kind of stuff that are shot with still cameras set in motion picture mode. They put a lot of stuff on there. They hang a lot of things on there, little preview screens and microphones and lights and all that kind of stuff. But they are using Nikons and Canons for shooting high-end video, so it can be done. The camera, I think, is probably, again, it depends on your money situation. I'm using this little Nikon 7700, and it shoots pretty decent little video. I'm not unhappy with it. I also owned for a while a G12 Canon camera. Canon and their software doesn't get along with me, or the menus don't get along with me too well. So I've been a Nikon guy forever. But I have this 800 shoots really nice video. But we're talking a couple of $1,000s there. Your high-end point and shoots, if they got about 8 or 10 megapixels, and if they can shoot raw, that's the important part about it. For stills, you want to be able to shoot raw, and there are actually very few small cameras that do that. And it's too elaborate to get into it right now, but raw captures everything that the sensor can possibly get. If you're shooting JPEGs to start with, that's okay for snapshots. It's okay for families. It's okay for the dogs and the, going to Grand Canyon kind of stuff. That's fine. But if we get down to it, and you want the ultimate amount of detail and color rendition, all that kind of thing, you shoot RAW. That's RAW, and Adobe and other manufacturers or other software people will either sell you or give you converters. So you can take those images and turn them into really high quality TIFFs. The magazines will love the TIFF file rather than a JPEG. A JPEG, one thing about a JPEG is if you open it up in a JPEG to start with, and you maybe make a little bit of a color correction, maybe it's a little bit green, so you put a little magenta in there, and you save it. Okay, you come back in and you open it up and say, well, I'd really like to darken that background, so you burn that down a little bit. And then maybe you got lighten some areas inside here a little bit, down in front. And then maybe you say, gosh, maybe it's still a little bit off color, so you make another color correction. And I do this. I go back and forth, and sometimes I'll go through a whole series of images 2 or 3 times and make little tweaks here and there. Well, eventually, anytime you save something in JPEG, you're throwing away information. So you're starting with a bathtub full of water, and by the time you get ready to use it, you take a little bit of hot water out, you put a little bit of cold water out of there, and all of a sudden you're down to an empty tub. And that's sort of what I envisioned it at. You want to start with a full tub, and you want to just be able to tweak it and keep as much water in that tub as you can, because it's, if you want to keep clean, that's the way to do it. Raw files are most professionals, if you're not shooting weddings and that kind of thing, if you're professional and you're shooting high-end stuff, you're always shooting raw, with very few exceptions. And your video, again, the same thing. The cameras are not perfect. Another 2 or 3 years, they'll be a lot better than they are now. So that's one thing about the digital era. Just wait a few months and things will change, things will be upgraded, and you wonder how you ever got along with that old junk that you had. The Nikon D1, or I had a Fuji S1 once upon a time. That thing is a virtual antique now, but I did some nice work with it. So that's what I would say, is that any of your good cameras, your Sonys make excellent cameras now. They actually make the sensors for Nikon. So sometimes you can get a little, save a little bit of money by going with the Olympus brands, or the Fuji, or the Sony brands. They're sometimes a little bit, I mean by a little bit, maybe a couple $100 cheaper, and that's something worth looking at. Now, if you've got some old Nikons hanging around the house, those lenses are fine. They'll work great for you. So don't just jump brands because of the fact that some other little camera brand came out and has a nice feature or two. Nikon will not let you down. Canon will not let you down. Those are the two major brands. You can't go wrong with either one of them.
I got another question from Pacific North Central here, and it's another question, Bob, on LEDs. What about a combination of warm white and cool white LEDs? I have already purchased them and was wondering how well they would do in photography. The ratio is 2 warm and 1 cool white.
Well, to me, it seems like you're complicating things a lot. Let me explain the best I can of what you're doing here. You're adding an element there that has to be reckoned with sooner or later. Now, let me give you an example. If you have a light that's, again, just take your Home Depot lights, go down and buy, if you're using 2 lights of one kind and 3 of the other, I would get all 3 of them alike. And what I do then is when you shoot your stuff, again, if you're using RAW, you just take a gray card or a white card and put it in the shot and shoot a photograph of it, and then take the card out and shoot your hero image, the image that you want to present. What you do is you would go into your RAW files, you select them all, you indicate that you want to look at all of them, and you go up there and you do a color balance on that gray card or the white card, whatever it may be, and it will adjust all of the files to the proper color rendition for 18% gray. In other words, that's what considered perfect. We used to use used to be a Kodak 18% gray card, and I don't know if Kodak's still in business or not, but I still have a couple of their gray cards around. But that will get you in the ballpark every time. Now, in lieu of that, you can go, probe the front of your locomotive with a gray smoke box or something like that. That'll work too, or something very close to that. I often go in and tweak it a little bit after that. But then all your lights, you try to keep all your lights with the same amount of Kelvin rating, and the CRI rating should be similar, and that's the best you can do. Back in the days of when we used to use floodlights, we had floodlights came out at 3,200 degrees Kelvin, which are on the warm side. But and if you had 4 or 5 floodlights or a spotlight and a couple of floodlights in the studio, and you'd burn a bulb out, you put another one in there, and it would be a different rendition. Well, that hurts you a little bit. Now, back in the old days, we were happy to get a photograph that looked halfway decent, and we just let it go. But if you're really, really critical, you take all the bulbs out and change them all at one time, which gets to be expensive. And all of a sudden, you have a closet full of vintage bulbs that are half gone and half good. So what you want to do is get all your color temperatures at the same rating, more or less. Now, I own a Minolta way back when, made a color meter that was pretty darn good. And I go in there and I read the color temperatures of both my strobe lights and my tungsten lights, or LEDs or fluorescence or whatever. I read those and get a reading. And at the time when that meter came out, you were supposed to use filters over your camera, and you'd have this whole stack of filters you carried with you when you're on location. And you put some maybe 10 magenta on there and 5 red and who knows what other colors. And you had to have all these filters on hand, or at least something close to them, to get your color to be correct. So I think if you mix lighting to start with, you're shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. Now, there are times where that may come in handy. Maybe you want a little bluer light on the background. Maybe make your sky a little bit bluer. And maybe your heroes up front will be a little warmer. That's fine. That's personal preference. But if you start out with the quote the official generic way of doing things, you want to get your color balance right. And then if you go in there afterward and want to tweak it a little bit, go ahead. No big deal. And there's all kinds of ways of doing that. One thing amazing about Photoshop is that everybody says, hey, he's an expert in Photoshop. And I say, nobody's an expert. That program is so elaborate and it's used by so many people in the business that you'll never use half the stuff there. And if you do learn it, you'll forget about it eventually. It's like being a neurosurgeon and an optical guy and a proctologist and all kinds of every kind of specialist in one, and you can't do that. It's not going to work for you. So I use it to give me good images. I do a lot of retouching. I do a lot of bringing in the backgrounds better, and color balancing and that sort of thing, and that gets me about 90% of the way there. It's not too often that I would go in there and start manipulating the color deliberately, but to get it right, yeah. And again, the raw file will do that really, really quickly.
Cool. Hey, Bob, Pacific North Central, how is what is that, Nikon S800C for photos?
I didn't realize they made a C. They make a E.
Yeah, maybe he'll post something on there again. Yeah, because he says it's a Nikon S800C?
Well, gosh, it may be a smaller camera, like a point and shoot kind of camera. And I'm not familiar with their Coolpix line that much. But the Nikon has a D800, or made a D800, and a D800E. Now the E, they took away a filter that actually makes it sharper. The image is incredibly sharp. But when you take away this filter, you take away something that was kind of necessary for most guys. And the E was designed pretty much for landscape photographers, which again, that's where the ultimate sharpness is what you're after. And I don't recall what it was, a filter they had in front of the sensor, and you lose just a little bit of sharpness with a filter. But I don't recall the reason for the filter in the first place.
He said it's an 800C. Yeah, that's what he said. It's an 800C.
Well, maybe, again, I'm only familiar with the 800E and the 800. So I don't know what that would be in that line. The new cameras now is an 810. 810. That's the newer version of it. It's a very good camera. It's really overkill for a lot of stuff. It's 36 megapixel, I believe. It's great if you're going to make 4-foot by 8-foot prints.
How do you do your white balance? Andrew from Australia was asking, how do you do your white balance?
Well, I don't. I use the color temperature meter whenever possible, and if it reads 4800 Kelvin, I will set my sensor at that and go with that. If I'm shooting with strobe lights, I normally set it around 5,000 with my particular brand of strobe lights. If I'm setting it outside, I put it around 6,000. Again, I do it in the raw. I do it in post-processing, where I go into the raw file and put a sensor down there, put what they call an eyedropper, and it will automatically give me everything. It'll give me whatever I want in 18% gray. So I don't do a lot of fooling around in the camera menu, because the fact is I forget. I have it set as something and I forget what it's set at. Yeah. And so you go from one job to the other job, and all of a sudden everything's off balance. So I prefer to do it afterward when I'm not worrying about people not showing up or a locomotive not operating, or anything, the other pressures that are on you.
Well, all you guys that are in the panel, if you have any questions, I think basically Bob, I think he's done presenting most of the stuff that he wanted to present. I'm just assuming that, Bob.
Yeah, you're right.
If any of you guys in the panel have any questions, don't attack him all at once. You guys know how the hangout works, one at a time. But Troy, which is not in the panel, he just wanted to let you know that yes, it is a small camera with a full HD video, that Nikon 800C that he was talking about.
Okay.
But if there's anybody in the panel that has any questions, feel free to ask. We still got a little bit of time here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
And like I said, you mentioned the 800C. About every 2 months, Nikon will come out with a new camera, and in opposite months, or in between months, Canon will come out with a new one. So you can be chasing that for the rest of your life. So I'm not familiar with it. I bought the 7700. I bought it as a rebuilt, and it works fine for me for what I need it for. I don't use it that often.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm just about to upgrade my camera. What one would you recommend for a medium price one?
Well, what are you using? What are you shooting with now?
I'm using Nikon. I just do stills.
Okay. And is it single lens reflex or point and shoot, or?
SLR.
Okay. Is it full frame or crop frame?
Full frame I've got at the moment.
Oh, okay. And then
I've also got a 6
well, the
by 8
current ones are
Hasselblad for digital back.
oh, Hasselblads. Sold mine a few years back. I mean, the current models from Nikon are what, the 610, 650, a 750, and an 810, and then the S4, I think, or F4, or S4, yeah, S4, which is overkill probably for you. I think the 700 or even the 610 would be fine for anything that you could ever think about using it for. The 750 is kind of neat because it has the articulating screen, which is what I would be my next venture if I was to go out and buy a camera. The idea of being able to lay the camera on your tracks and have that screen, swivel and tilt to where you want to see it is a great advantage. And that's the reason I bought both the Canon camera I had in the past and the little Nikon 7700. That tilting screen is wonderful. You can't ask for any more. On the other hand, it's probably more fragile, and when you're out doing stuff, running around in the field someplace and doing aerial photography and stuff, it may get you can get it bummed up by knocking against things.
Yeah, this isn't really a question, but more of a statement, I guess. I've got the Mamiya C3 and a Rolleiflex, both dual lens Rolleiflex cameras.
Oh yeah.
Reflex cameras. And I use them a lot for rail fanning and taking general outdoor photography. But I use an Argus C3 for pinhole work, and it came out exceptional. The main thing is that you have to get your pinhole clean so you don't get that bellows effect.
Well, that may be true. There's a couple of guys, I read an article, or I put it aside just a few days ago, of an old model railroader where you take a typical lens and you put some, almost like I would call them knitting needles sort of thing, and you have these that radiate out from a pinhole. And that allows you to actually focus with a standard lens, like a film 50 millimeter or 35 millimeter type lens, and then you stop it down to where it covers the opening part, and so only the pinhole makes the exposure. There's a fellow up in Austin, Texas by the name of Tommy Holt has used that for photography. The only trouble is you still don't get quite the sharpness you do, the tack sharpness that you get nowadays with the digital sensor.
Yeah,
I don't know. Again, I've never seen one that was totally sharp. Now the depth of field will make up for a lot of that, yeah, and it'll probably be acceptable. So I'm not going to knock it from that standpoint. I didn't feel all the work I've done. I've never felt that I really failed by not having it, is what I would say.
Yeah, I just can't kind of shake that digital world. I'm still using, and still can get, by the way, 35 millimeter film. I don't know how long, but I can still get it.
Just can't get it developed. All the machines are
Oh yeah.
Some customers still have a machine.
I got my bags.
I figured I had Walgreens left, and I went over there the other day, and they're gone.
Yep. No, I have my bags and my chemicals. So.
Hey,
Bob,
Bob.
I've got a question for you. What are your thoughts on doing frame grabs from video? So should one, try to get a video camera and be able to take stills from that, or should one get a SLR style or still point and shoot camera that does video?
Well, it depends on the quality of the original video camera. If you have a high-end video camera, The stills from there are pretty decent. But it's easier, I think, and I'm not an expert on this, is that if you have, like you said, this 800E or the 77 I have, 7700, you can get nice stills and nice video without having to invest a tremendous amount of money. I've been with video production companies, and they don't want me around being nosy. So I don't know, how high you have to get in the video camera business to where you can grab stills out of there. I recall going back in the days of darkroom days, people would bring in 16 millimeter film, and we would try to make prints from it, and everyone was fuzzy because the shutter speed was only like a 15th of a second. Nothing's going to be sharp.
Right.
So what you have now is a much better chance at doing that.
Yeah, and I use a D5200, Nikon D5200.
Okay.
And with the flip, the viewfinder that you were talking about, and I find that quite handy to take 1080p videos with. Fairly decent quality.
Yeah, I think it'd be fine for you, and grabbing a frame or two out of there for use, it should be adequate. On the other hand, you can just stop shooting for a little while, or after you shot your video, shoot a still or two, and you got it backed up.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
if you guys
Blake,
had good success with video on DSLR, I mean, I know that's not strictly speaking to static imagery, but I have a Nikon, I can't remember the model, but 17 or 18 megapixel, and I've had a significant problem getting it to take video in any reasonable quality or frame rate to the point where I was considering buying a camcorder. And I mean, I know that doesn't speak to static imagery as that concern, but if that's something you guys are having good success with, it may just be something I'm doing not up to par.
Well, I'm just starting with the video part of I'm shooting it with my 800 Nikon and the 7700, and so far what I'm seeing is pretty darn good. What I am concerned about is that when you have it on autofocus, is that you can hear the autofocus motor in your soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought an external microphone that may or may not cure that. I haven't played it back that many times, and of course, how much you turn it up is pick up noise. You're going to have noise on the audio portion, but if you have a locomotive with soundtracks on it or something like that, you're not going to hear the camera whizzing back and forth as it focuses. I had a video. I have a camcorder, and the trouble with that thing is that it's slow. It's so slow focusing. That it's difficult to do it. If you it'll try and hunt and search and peck, where so far my Nikons have done a better job of holding focus. Again, maybe it's just how I do it. I'm reading a book now on how to do video production. In other words, they don't care about the cameras, they don't care about the lighting, they don't care about all that technical stuff. What they want to talk about is how the sequence works. And they're talking about not having anything longer than 10 seconds in most cases, unless there's a specific reason for it. So this gentleman specifies you use 6 10-second sequences rather than one, where you're moving the camera around and zooming in and zooming out and all that kind of stuff. Because the idea says you make people dizzy. Now, that may or may not be true, because I look at some of my videos and I zoom in and zoom out and that sort of thing occasionally. If you do it slowly. If you do a pan, you pan very slowly from a tripod, and you do it over and you do it over and you do it over again until you get it right. That's something I've been very impatient about over the years when I've done this sort of stuff. I do 2 takes and say that's good enough. Nah, it's not. You do 6 of them or something like that. And that's why you have that clapper in motion picture business where you say take 45 and the script is gone through again and again and again until it's right. So, but putting
Have you ever tried to take pictures of the moon? And because with a long lens, the toughest thing I had to figure out was how to not get a blurry moon picture. And I was able to finally accomplish it, but with some very particular settings on the Nikon.
Well, there's no trains on the moon. That doesn't make any sense.
I know, but I had to use the moon in my Halloween train video.
Good one.
Full moon in particular.
which you can superimpose the moon over your night shot of the the California Zephyr going by.
All right.
Okay, we'll let him have that one. Hey, Dave Vallejos, did you have a question?
I forgot what it was.
Sorry, I tried to get you. These guys beat me to the punch and beat you to the punch.
Yeah, I just talk about those little cheap point-and-shoot cameras. I got one I carry around with me all the time when I'm out with the Cub Scouts. It's made by Sony. It's a Cybershot one. It's supposed to mainly take still photos, but does allow you to take movies. I found I can take better movies on it than I can still shots. But it's still a good little camera. But it says here it's 16.1 megapixels. And I don't think it's that high quality.
Well, I think anytime you get in the probably 4 or 5 range, maybe you're probably going to be okay for most video work. Little handy cam that I have, I think, was only 2 point something, and it's not sharp. It gets by, but it's it's designed for family stuff. On your television, it's not really designed to be edited and cut up and spliced and all that kind of thing that we all want to do nowadays.
Well, that's good.
I think you get what you pay for.
Oh, certainly.
We're kind of running down here on the time for. I want to thank Bob for coming in and doing this. I think a lot of guys that are doing anything to do with still shots and all that, I think some guys learned something out of this presentation. And I've been trying to get somebody to do a presentation like this for the last several months now, and I'm glad Bob came up and he fit that per se spot, I guess. But I want to thank all the guys that come into the panel, all the questions, all the viewers that came in and watched the presentation tonight. I just want to remind everybody again about the YouTubeModelBuilders.com. All the good information that you can go there. All the schedules are updated for all the live shows and the presentation. I want to hand it over to JD again. He has a little bit that he wants to talk a little bit more about the EMAG. And I don't want to, I don't want to sound like a spammer or anything here, but I think out of all the information that's out there for YouTube, anything to do with model railroading in particular, the Google Plus and the YouTube Model Builders team has really came forward and put a lot of good free stuff out there for all the modelers that are out there. So for the last couple of minutes here, I want to go ahead and hand it over to JD and let him talk about the EMAG. Matter of fact, that might be a good presentation sometime, JD. So go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Bob, first of all, thank you for coming on the show, on this presentation. That was very, very helpful, very useful information, and I'm sure everybody here found that quite valuable. I'm absolutely what's the word I'm looking for? Enlightened by this and sort of excited by it, and it comes to my mind that down the road I would love to put together an issue based around photography of model railroads and rail fanning pictures. So as I think about that, I also think about the one of the features that we have in the EMAG, the collage. And if you are inspired by Bob's presentation and his work and his ideas and thoughts, just like I am, I think, go out and take those pictures and then submit them for the EMAG, and, we'll get them in the collage. And that's a great way to showcase your pictures, a collage of your photos. And I think you guys have seen the past 3 issues, and it's a nice page, and we can add multiple pages of collages for those who want to submit. So be inspired, go take pictures, submit your work to the EMAG, submit some articles. We're always looking for articles out there. And I'm very inspired to put together an issue based on this, and maybe towards winter time.
Thanks, JD.
Thank you, dude.
Can I stick my mouth in here for a second?
Go for it, Bob.
Okay, I do want to thank you all for tuning in. I hope I gave you something of interest. If you have any questions, you can always reach me through my website. It's bobwphoto.com and photo.com, and I hang out there every day, try to make a living here and there. If I can't answer it, I can probably find somebody else I can. But like I said, I'm not that much tuned to the smaller cameras. I'm not that much tuned to anything but Photoshop as far as the processing of images goes. So I know there's Photo Deluxe and all kinds of other programs, but I'm not familiar with them, but I don't use them, and I don't use things I can't use. I mean, I'm not going to learn things I can't use. So that's the problem I do have with dealing with a lot of people who have programs from all over the world and all over different little favorite things like your GIMP or Chimp or whatever it's called. It's free. I got to pay $600 every once in a while, so I better use the darn stuff. So again, thank you for hanging around and being patient with me a little bit. And this is new to me, so I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for coming on. And don't go nowhere, Bob, because I want to ask you a question after the broadcast is over with.
Oh, I'm a lot cheaper than Ken Patterson.
Well, I found that out just by getting you on the presentation. So once again, I would like to thank all the viewers for coming in to tonight's presentation. I hope everybody learned something out of photography and what kind of cameras and all that. And I want to thank Bob again for coming in and doing this for us. And until the next time, adios, guys.